Hello, everyone. It's Cassandra with Bite Size. Whether you're a new leader, seasoned, or just starting out on your career journey, you might ask yourself, what does it take to be a good leader? So today we have StephenEMorris, a friend of our co-founder Rochelle, who is a speaker, author, and award-winning leader with over 20 years experience in complex and uncertain, highly skilled technical environments. He recently spoke at the Oxford Leader in Tech, and he has his own series on leadership in organizations. And special fact, at the end of the month, he will be releasing a book called Leaders, Believers, and Expert Deceivers. So Stephen, thank you for joining us on our show today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your own career journey?
Thank you, Cassandra. I'm delighted to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and have a chat. Briefly about my own career journey. I started in IT many years ago. I started initially aiming to be a developer, a software engineer, and this was a long time ago. The first platform I was developing on was a VAX, so a mainframe system. But I only did that for about 6 months before my boss told me I wasn't a very good developer and moved me into an infrastructure role. So I kind of went through infrastructure, networking, that sort of stuff. And then I'm pretty sure that someone said, "You're not very good at that either, Stephen. So maybe you'd be better with people." So I've always sort of bridged the two, I suppose, of a techie and that sort of stuff. But I got into leadership fairly early, and then kind of got fascinated by it, I suppose. I got intrigued by how people work, how people think, how teams work, that sort of stuff. And I've always, in my kind of permanent roles, I've always been in tech. But as a consultant more recently, I work in other fields as well. But it was sort of accidental, like so many of our careers are, I suppose.
Yes, and I completely agree. I mean, I similar start where I started as a database support, and here I am working with people too, because as you said, they're much more interesting and there's so much more depth I feel in that area. And then problems are much more challenging to solve. All right. So I had a chance to get an early copy of your book. And the first thing was that my mirror is broken, right? As I was like one of the many people thinking that there's some prescribed formula that if I read more books and try all these tactics, be a servant leader, authentic leader, and so forth, I can achieve greatness. So how did you come to some of the conclusions that are written in your book? And, how did you come to those conclusions?
Thank you. I think it was very similar to as you described. My sort of trajectory was one of I assumed that everybody knew what they were talking about. I was very deferent to the bosses and the people I was working with, the leaders that I saw around me. I thought they must be doing something right. And I did all the training courses and I read the books and so on and so on and so on. And then maybe it took me a while, but I started to get a little bit of a sense that everything wasn't quite right. That a leader gets lauded, but actually I know what was happening in the background. And maybe that's just you getting a bit older and a bit more cynical. So then I started to kind of read into it, and with more experiences in work and the kind of people that I've spoken to and engaged with, and then with more understanding of where some of the practices that we use come from, it starts to paint a pretty negative picture, I suppose, about the whole industry of leadership and delivery mechanisms. There may be some truth and some value in those skills, but the way that they are often described is that they are the right thing to do, and you can just take that skill and move it to any situation you're in. But reality doesn't really turn out that way. Reality tends to suggest that you need something a little bit more bespoke for the environment that you're in. But that's quite a difficult thing to accept, I suppose, for some people. And it's certainly something that the consultants and others don't really want people to know too much. They just want you to buy their thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that they don't know what they're doing sometimes, and they're just assessing, the context and being like, all right, let's go with this amount. And I guess they provide this outside perspective that they are like, yeah, this is what the other groups do and so forth.
Well, exactly. The classic one that I'm sure a lot of people would recognize is the sort of so-called Spotify model, which isn't a model. Everybody understands that that's the case, but the way that they organized themselves was very appropriate for what they were trying to do, or at least it gave them some good results. There could have been better ways, but it gave them good results. But to suggest that that same idea would then work in an industrial complex somewhere else, and if we do that, we're going to be successful, then yeah, that's where the cynical me ramps up pretty high, I suppose.
No worries, no worries. I mean, I think what you talked about, the cynicalism, it's just like, I think it's just, as you said, time and experience, right? And I think that's something my friends and colleagues joke about. It's like, how are we getting more jaded and jaded as we continue along in our career journey?
Yeah.
So given that though, like, having this skepticism or awareness that, hey, maybe, we don't necessarily need to prescribe to this particular way. So how do you bring that sort of awareness towards, with your other teammates, your leadership team and beyond, and start, having folks be a little bit self-aware of, are we doing the right thing? Should we be following something that may not be working for us?
So two things I think I thought of with that question. One was just a point to be clear. I'm not saying with any of this stuff that the tools themselves or the particular methods of leadership or whatever they're inert, if you like. They are just things. So when the message that I try to convey is, it's a little bit more like if you're in your garden or you're in the garage, you're trying to repair your car, you've got a toolbox full of things, let's say. You don't just use one tool for absolutely every task and everything that you've got going on. So the way that I like to start conversations, at least, is to try and explore some of the situation that a team or an organization it is facing. So there are lots of tools to help you sort of make sense of what it is that's in front of you. So ideally, I facilitate, for example, a session where we actually take a good look at the kinds of work that we've got in front of us, because then that sets up a fairly straightforward conversation about, okay, are we well organized to meet the requirements of the work that we've got in front of us? It's trying to, I maybe not be answering your question very articulately, but it's about trying to get in front of the decision about practice with a conversation about situation before anything else. So if I'm sure you've had the experience, you talk to an organization or talk to a team and they want to work with a particular tool, whether that's Scrum, or an HR department says, well, everyone should be an authentic leader in our organization. That's really important to us. A good question, or a good simple question, is what problem are you trying to solve with that particular approach? And maybe that opens the door to say, well, are we sure that that is definitely the right approach given the problem that we're trying to get through? A long answer, Cassandra, sorry. Did that even answer your question, actually?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it kind of goes back to like that simple point of like first asking, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then that second thing that you added in is like, what's that approach to get there, right? Because I think many times when I work with teams and my organization, they're already at the solution phase. We're like, yeah, let's try all these different things. I'm like, oh, wait, what are we even trying to do here? And so once we're at that point, it's good to reevaluate, how are we working towards this way, right? Like, should we work in this way? Do we have the right people, the right tooling here, and the frameworks to follow to deliver that experience that we're desiring at the end of the day? So I like what you said, because it's just that it's kind of maybe things that we're already doing, right? Always asking those questions. It's just, adding that a little bit more of like approach, frameworks, tooling, things like that. Are we using a shovel to actually sow seeds and stuff like that? So
yeah,
appreciate your response.
Yeah. And back to the point about none of the tools being quite right, because there's a sort of an extension to this thing that, and it's a difficult thing to articulate quickly, but it is very difficult to understand what kind of situation you're really truly in, because there are so many different things, so many factors to that. So you might have the tools and frameworks and all of that sort of stuff that we've talked about. We might have a particular technical group with a particular skill in an area, a particular development or a software language or something. We might have our particular market, our customers, and so we've got all of those things going on in the first place, and our skills and our capabilities. So we think, right, given our problem space and that stuff, it seems to make sense to have kind of, let's try Scrum or XP or something in this particular group. But you can't ever understand everything that's going on. So you might find out later that one of the people in the team actually had an affair with someone in another part of the organization at some point, or that the organization, which is perhaps a slightly less flippant and a more common thing, the organization's disposition to how work gets done and results get reported clashes very hard with that thing, even though it's the appropriate tool for that particular job. So the point I'm trying to kind of illustrate is, if you think about it, I think you give yourself a better chance of choosing a more appropriate tool or a more appropriate approach to what you're working on. But you really, no matter what you do, you can't know everything in the environment you're in, no matter what you're doing. But I think if you at least try, I think you give yourself a better chance of some success the other side.
Well, there you have it. So, I mean, as Stephen mentioned just on that final point, it's just, you may not know everything. And then as well, you might consider some of the dimensions, the factors, the situations, and the context, but that's the first step. It's just being aware that you actually considered all these things before you stepped into wherever your next part of your journey. So that's our episode. So thanks so much, Stephen, for joining us today. Leavers, Believers, and Expert Deceivers comes out on November 30th, so at the end of this month. So as always, everyone, thank you for listening to And Bite Size. Be sure to like and subscribe our video. And as always, have a wonderful day. Cheers.